everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're cracking open a stack of sources that literally hand you a toolkit, for making sense of our wild, complex world, our mission, to pull out the most vital insights on how to think critically, how to discern what's really real, especially for you, the curious learner looking to cut through all the noise out there.
Yeah, exactly. And we're drawing heavily today from the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe Unabridged. That's by Steven Novella and his co-authors. This isn't really about telling you what to believe. It's more about giving you the mental framework, the tools for how to evaluate information that, comes your way.
Right.
Think of it as a giant inoculation, maybe, against bad science, deception, just plain faulty thinking.
Intellectual self-defense, I like that. We're going to explore why our own minds can be, well, our trickiest adversaries sometimes, how arguments often go spectacularly wrong, and the very real consequences of not thinking critically. By the end of this deep dive, you should walk away with some practical tools to become a more discerning, more informed individual. Okay, so let's unpack this first part. We often assume our minds are reliable, don't we? Like a perfect recording device. But the sources, well, they reveal our brains are wonderfully complex, sure, but also incredibly prone to error. The unaided human mind is surprisingly vulnerable to so many fallacies and illusions.
It's so true, and the core message here is really humility. Steven Novella puts it quite starkly, he says. A century of memory research is not on your side. Yeah. Our memories aren't passive recordings at all. They're actively constructed, built from imperfect perceptions, filtered through our beliefs, our biases. They morph, they merge, they can even fabricate things over time, often serving more to support the stories we want to tell ourselves than to simply report objective facts. We just don't have little camcorders in our skulls.
So, okay, if our memories are this prone to error, not just like little mistakes, but full-on fabrication, how do we even begin to trust our own personal history? It kind of feels like the ground beneath us is constantly shifting.
Well, it often is. That vivid childhood memory you hold dear. It's likely, the source suggests, mostly or even entirely fake.
Oh.
Yeah. Our brains, they crave a continuous and consistent narrative, right? So they'll fuse details from different events. They kind of stitch together a coherent story. They might confabulate, which basically means making stuff up to fill in the blanks, sometimes without us even realizing it. They personalize events, shifting them so we're maybe more central than we were. And they distort specific details to better fit our current emotional state or beliefs. The book gives a great example. Steven Novella's brothers, Bob and Jay. They vividly remembered this strange tour guide in Pompeii, but Steven's memory is that their mother told them about that guide from a previous trip she took.
So even shared history gets rewritten.
Exactly. Inside our own heads.
That really chills me because it means even our most cherished recollections can be, well, edited. The sources also bring up Elizabeth Loftus's famous Lost in the Mall study. That showed how easily false memories can be implanted, right? Can you walk us through that?
Absolutely. It's foundational stuff. Loftus found that after being prompted with just a made-up story from the relatives, 29% of subjects actually remembered a completely false event of being lost in a shopping mall.
29%.
Yeah. And it wasn't just vague feelings. They often added vivid, confident details to this memory that never happened. Or think about Hillary Clinton's anecdote about landing under sniper fire in Bosnia. Later, video showed that wasn't the case. She likely remembered the genuine fear and danger surrounding her trips to troubled areas. And her brain, probably without any malicious intent, just constructed a narrative to match that strong emotional theme.
And this isn't just about personal anecdotes, is it? I mean, we're talking about something with potentially much more serious implications.
Precisely. Research by Julia Shaw and Stephen Porter took it even further. They showed that many adults could be convinced they committed a non-existent crime, like assault, after just 3 hours of interrogation using suggestive techniques.
3 hours?
Just 3 hours. It highlights the incredible dangers of suggestion and how easily these false memories can be implanted, even for really serious events. And these fabricated memories can feel just as real, have all the same complex details and emotional weight as genuine ones.
So the bottom line for you, the listener, is what? How do we live with these unreliable internal narrators?
Well, it means cultivating a healthy dose of skepticism and humility about your own recollections. The source even advises something pretty direct. Whenever you find yourself saying, I clearly remember, stop. No, you don't. What you have is a constructed memory. It's likely fused, contaminated, confabulated, personalized, and distorted in some way. It's a humbling thought, for sure, but it's crucial for critical thinking.
And it extends beyond just memory, doesn't it? We also fall prey to things like motivated reasoning.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Motivated reasoning is basically when we defend beliefs we have an emotional investment in. We often end up twisting logic or cherry-picking facts because subconsciously we really want those ideas to win.
We've all been there.
Absolutely. And it's that moment when you're caught in an argument, and even when presented with clear facts, you just find yourself doubling down. We also see the fundamental attribution error. That's where we tend to attribute other people's actions to their internal character. They're gullible. They're irresponsible. But we rationalize our own similar actions as due to external factors. I was a victim of circumstance. I had no choice.
So that friend who believes in a really out there conspiracy theory, instead of immediately thinking they're just ignorant, you might consider, okay, what external factors could be influencing their belief? That's what the source suggests. It's about maybe giving others the benefit of the doubt sometimes, with withholding judgment because we rarely have all the information.
Right.
These individual cognitive biases, like our shaky memories and this motivated reasoning thing, they often merge and, I guess, amplify when we engage in public discourse or try to evaluate information. This brings us neatly to a whole category of pitfalls, the logical fallacies that can just derail critical thinking and really warp public understanding.
Exactly. Yeah, to be a true critical thinker means you have to police your own logic, but also recognize poor logic in others. One of the most prevalent fallacies is the argument from ignorance, also known as ad ignorantium. This fallacy suggests a specific belief is true simply because we don't know that it isn't true.
Ah, okay. I can see how tempting that can be. If we genuinely don't know what that light in the sky is, isn't there a natural human tendency to fill that void with the most exciting explanation, maybe? Even if it's outlandish. How do we resist that?
It's incredibly tempting. You're right. UFO proponents often use this, right?
Yeah.
Those lights in the sky are unidentified, therefore they must be alien spacecraft.
Yeah.
Or intelligent design advocates sometimes claim that unexplained biological structures must be the work of a designer, just because science hasn't fully explained every single detail yet. The key is to resist that urge to fill the unknown with a definitive conclusion simply because it sounds compelling or fits a narrative. I don't know is a perfectly valid and often the most correct answer.
That's a powerful point. Another fallacy the sources highlight is the appeal to antiquity, right? Assuming an old idea must be valid just because it's, quote, stood the test of time.
Oh, this one is insidious. Astrology, for instance. It's a superstitious belief system that predates modern science by millennia. And traditional acupuncture, as the source points out, it originally stemmed from superstitious bloodletting linked to ancient Chinese astrology and vitalistic ideas.
Wow, I didn't know that connection.
Yeah. The argument falsely assumes that time will test such modalities. But history tells a very different story. Millions of people can believe something for thousands of years, even if that belief has no basis in reality.
Yeah.
Think of galenic medicine's four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. That dominated Western medicine for nearly 2,000 years, dictating treatments like bloodletting, despite having absolutely no basis in actual biology.
That's a really sobering reminder that time itself doesn't establish whether or not an idea is valid. You need logic and evidence, not just historical staying power.
And these cognitive traps, these fallacies, they aren't just academic curiosities. The real dangers escalate when our inherent biases and these logical fallacies combine with strong emotional investment. They manifest in serious, real-world consequences, often in the realm of pseudoscience. Let's maybe look at how this plays out, starting with the devastating impact of false memory syndrome, which, as the source points out, tragically emerged from the debunked repressed memory therapy craze of the 80s and 90s.
Right, this idea of repressed memories, it was never really empirically demonstrated, was it? Yet it caused so much harm. Can you give us some examples of that catastrophic impact?
Oh, it led to horrific miscarriages of justice. The McMartin preschool case is probably the most infamous. Children's testimony was elicited through really dubious leading techniques, and the wrongful conviction of Dan and Fran Keller, based on just bizarre, unfounded claims generated through therapy, it demonstrates the catastrophic impact these practices had. Another stark example, George Franklin's murder conviction. It was overturned after his daughter's recovered memories from therapy were deemed totally unreliable, all because of vivid, confident, but ultimately inaccurate memories.
So what's the lesson here for us when we encounter claims about recovered memories or maybe other similar therapies today?
Well, it means techniques like guided imagery, hypnosis, suggestion, and group pressure can and do construct entirely fake memories.
Oh.
And it's not just about individuals making mistakes. Professionals are not excused for persisting in false beliefs that have long been discredited. It really represents a failure in many ways of professional self-regulation, where debunked ideas can still find fertile ground and cause harm.
And I imagine this applies to modern health fads, too.
Absolutely. The source explicitly calls out naturopathy as a hodgepodge of mostly unscientific treatment modalities based on vitalism and other pre-scientific notions of disease. Vitalism, for instance, that's the outdated belief in some non-physical life force governing living things instead of, modern scientific biology.
Right.
The tragic death of Jade Eric, a 30-year-old woman who died from an intravenous turmeric infusion administered by a naturopath. That's a chilling example. It highlights the harm caused by practices like colon hydrotherapy or unproven vitamin infusions. These generally offer no better efficacy than placebo and can be very dangerous, risking things like organ failure or bowel perforation, especially when performed outside legitimate medical settings.
Wow. Many people probably think that something like positive thinking is, at worst, harmless. But the sources reveal a surprising negative effect.
Indeed. It's counterintuitive, isn't it? Studies show that outcome-based mental simulations like just visualizing yourself getting a good grade actually lead to worse performance than process-based thinking. Process-based is imagining yourself studying for the exam, doing the work.
Ah.
Just imagining the outcome is a waste of time and effort that detracts from more practical activity. The action itself is what usually brings the positive outcome, not just wishing for it.
And it gets even more critical, maybe even ethically fraught, for those facing serious illness.
Yes. For terminally ill patients, this relentless push for positive thinking can create profound disappointment if they somehow feel they failed because they couldn't will themselves better. It might even lead individuals to delay meaningful evidence-based treatment while pursuing ineffective positive thinking strategies. The hard truth, according to the research cited, is that there is simply no relationship between emotional well-being and mortality in the terminally ill. And this expectation of constant positivity can actually diminish their quality of life in their final days by placing an undue burden on them.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. When our brains try to make sense of a chaotic world, they can sometimes latch on to these grand conspiracies, these belief systems claiming a vast, powerful group is carrying out a deception against the public. This often seems to arise from a deep human desire for control and understanding, especially in ambiguous or frightening situations.
Absolutely. And this is precisely where many of those cognitive biases and logical fallacies we talked about converge and kind of multiply.
Yeah.
Conspiracy theories are often called closed belief systems because they're essentially designed like a fortress for their own ideas, right? And
Yeah.
contradictory evidence that comes along, that's immediately dismissed as part of the conspiracy or maybe a false flag operation.
Right.
And ironically, a lack of evidence isn't seen as weakening the theory. No, it's often presented as proof of a really effective cover-up. It's a kind of self-sealing logic where the theory always wins, no matter the actual evidence.
The sources detail a really interesting personal adventure of Jay Novella. After watching the Loose Change documentary on 9/11, he found himself questioning the official narratives. He describes getting furious during the film and feeling that some of it had to be real, even though he had personal connections to the tragic events. That just shows how powerful these narratives can be.
It really highlights the sheer emotional power, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But, as Jay's co-host pointed out to him later, that documentary, like many conspiracy narratives, started with a conclusion. It decided what happened first, and then it was just moving chess pieces around to prove their original premise. It's what the source calls anomaly hunting, finding anything slightly unusual or unfamiliar and using that to prove the conspiracy rather than objectively evaluating all the evidence.
Yeah, we see this pattern with things like the moon landing hoax theories and flat earthers as well. They point to anomalies that actually have pretty straightforward scientific explanations, like why there are no stars in the moon landing photos, or non-parallel shadows, or atmospheric refraction, letting us see further than geometry might suggest. But they dismiss these explanations as just part of the grand deception, like a massive NASA conspiracy.
What's really illuminating here, though, is the work by David Robert Grimes. He published a paper in PLS 1 back in 2016. He actually mathematically explored the probability of these grand conspiracies failing from within, just due to human error and leakage. Using historical examples like the Snowden leaks or the Tuskegee syphilis experiments, real conspiracies that were eventually exposed, he estimated something fascinating. Conspiracies involving large numbers of people, like the estimated 411,000 involved in the Apollo moon landing program, would likely fail, meaning be exposed, within about 4 years.
So the bigger the conspiracy, the quicker it unravels.
Essentially, yes. Dean Cowan summarized it perfectly, saying humans are fundamentally incapable of sustaining conspiracies on a grand scale because some of our most defining qualities as a species are inattention to detail, a tendency to panic, and an inability to keep our mouths shut.
Huh. That's actually incredibly reassuring. So, okay, given all these pitfalls, our unreliable brains, the logical traps, the seductive lure of conspiracy, how can you, the listener, arm yourself? How do you navigate this as a consumer of information? The sources provide some excellent practical guidance.
Yeah, they do. First, and this is crucial, understand that there is no single unimpeachable source of information. None. You really have to make an effort to track information back to the original source whenever possible, and always look for a variety of sources and opinions. If one side in a debate consistently resorts to logical fallacies and distortions, that's usually a pretty good sign they have a weak position.
And don't just accept the first answer you find, or maybe more importantly, the answer you want to be true because of motivated reasoning, right? You need to actively seek out experts who disagree with you. That sounds uncomfortable, but it's crucial for genuine understanding. If your take differs significantly from the consensus of experts, you need to figure out why. Usually, it means you're missing something crucial.
That applies significantly to how we consume science journalism, too. Journalists, often under deadline pressure, tend to prioritize stories that are exciting, new, and simple. This can lead to hype and sensationalism, where, every basic science advance dealing with cells apparently might one day lead to a cure for cancer. There's this inherent tension between the slow, cautious, nuanced nature of scientific discovery and journalism's need for novelty and clear narratives.
And it creates real problems for the public trying to understand health news, for example. Remember that 2008 study? It found that between 62 and 77% of stories fail to adequately address costs, harms, benefits, the quality of the evidence, and the existence of other options when reporting on medical news. Yeah.
That's a systemic problem, showing major flaws in reporting, even from top news outlets sometimes. So you, as the consumer, need to ask critical questions. What did the data actually say? Is this finding mainstream or a minority opinion? Did the reporter talk to any critics, or did they just let the researchers toot their own horns, as the source puts it? This deep dive has really explored the intricate ways our brains process information and how external forces, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not, can exploit those mechanisms. We've seen that skepticism isn't about being cynical or negative. It's about rigorous inquiry. It's about intellectual humility, and it's about a commitment to evidence, even when that evidence challenges our own deeply held beliefs.
Exactly. As the material reminds us, citing the philosopher Bertrand Russell, science does not aim at establishing immutable truth. Its aim is to approach the truth by successive approximations. We have to constantly reevaluate our understanding because there will always be new information that refines or even overturns what we think we know. It's a process, not a destination. And perhaps the most liberating, maybe even provocative takeaway from this entire exploration is that closing thought from our sources. Don't trust us.
Right. Think for yourself. Verify the claims. Understand how we know what we claim to know. Because in a world absolutely saturated with information and misinformation, the most powerful tool you possess is your own critically engaged mind. We all make mistakes, right? The goal isn't perfection, it's being open to correcting those mistakes when the evidence points that way.
It truly is an endless journey of critical inquiry, isn't it? But it's one that rewards you with immense clarity and hopefully a truer understanding of the world around you. We really hope this deep dive has armed you with some essential tools for your path forward.